Okay, there's also two basic ways to record and store your data. They're called stacked and unstacked charts. In a stacked chart, each column represents a variable and each row represents an object or a person. So really, honestly, this is the most common way that we are going to record our data anyway. Unstacked only works for two variables, first of all, and it says data values are stored in two columns and each column is a variable from a different group. So what you notice over here in the unstacked form is that this one value right here of 70 inches both kind of tells me two things. It tells me a height and it also tells me that I am talking about a male. Whereas over in this one, those are separated. Height and gender are given in two different areas. So this is the stacked is the way, honestly, that we like to store our data. When you collect data and when you pull it up in StatCrunch, you're probably going to see it in the stacked form. Okay, so let's do an example here. It says, using a sensor worn around her wrist, a student recorded the amount of sleep she got several nights in a row. She recorded whether it was a weekend or a weeknight. For the weekends, she got 8.1 and 8.3 hours, and on weeknights, she got 7.9, 6.5, 8.2, 7.0, and 7.3 hours of sleep. In unstacked form, so kind of like the one on the right above us, what this would look like is we would have weekend and weekday recordings. And under weekend, we would write our hours there. So we would have 8.1 and 8.3. And on weekdays, 7.9, 6.5, 8.2, 7.0, and 7.3. So again, each one of these numbers, any number itself in here tells us two different things. It tells us the hours and it tells us the day type. So I get 7.9 hours and on a weekday. Now in stacked form, not only are we going to write it in stacked form here, but we're also going to use some coding. We're going to use 1 for weekend and 0 for weeknight. So this information right here tells me how at least to label one of my columns. I know that if 1 means weekend, then weekend is one of my headings. And when I go through, what I want to do is use a 1 if it's a weekend and a 0 if it's not. So I have 2 weekends and the other are weeknights. So the other information that I need to have recorded here then, what I haven't talked about yet, is I haven't talked about hours of sleep. So now I can just match it up. Hours of sleep on the first weekend night was 8.1, 8.3, and then these are my weekdays, 7.9, 6.5, 8.2, 7.0, and 7.3. Context is key. When you first observe a data set, honestly, you should start asking yourself these questions, and you're going to get better and better at asking yourself these questions as the class continues. Who or what were observed? What variables were measured? How were the variables measured? What are the units of measurement that we're using? Who collected this data and how did they collect the data? Where were they collected? Why did they collect the data? And obviously, when was the data collected? Because if it was collected 50 years ago, perhaps we need to have a new study, an updated study, to really make any generalizations.